Hi folks, in this Rambles with Robin and Ruby video, we take a very special boat trip from Dawson City down the Yukon River to the historic location of a fort named Fort Constantine and an historic village named Fortymile, both in the Yukon, Canada. Fort Constantine as a structure has not existed for many years. Nature reclaimed its wooden structure many years ago, but there are historic photos, such as this one, that show us what the fort looked like. By the way, Murray Hayne was the photographer of that photo, which appears in his old book. Details are in this video description. Recall that Dawson City is located about 530 kilometers or 330 miles northwest of Whitehorse, the capital of Yukon. Fort Constantine was located about 88 kilometers or 55 miles downriver from Dawson City. The fort used to sit at the junction of the Fortymile and Yukon rivers, across from the historic site of Ch'ëdähdëk, also known as Fortymile. For context, Ch'ëdähdëk or Fortymile town site was established in 1886 when Europeans found placer gold along the Fortymile River. That was before the Klondike Gold Rush, which started in 1896. Ch'ëdähdëk or Fortymile is the oldest European town in Canada's Yukon, although First Nations people had occupied this area long before the arrival of the Europeans. There are several reasons why we wanted to visit Fort Constantine. First, Fort Constantine was built in 1895, and it is a historic site. It is the location where, in 1894, Inspector Charles Constantine of the Northwest Mounted Police recommended to the Canadian government the establishment of a Northwest Mounted Police detachment to keep peace and enforce Canada's sovereignty in the area. Second reason, Fort Constantine was the first Northwest Mounted Police fort in what we now call Yukon. Third, in September 2023, Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile area, including Fort Constantine, was recognized as one of the 8 components that together make up the new Tr'ondëk Klondike UNESCO World Heritage Site. Fourth reason, Ch'ëdähdëk or Fortymile has extremely important cultural and historical significance for the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and other First Nation groups, including the Hwëch'in, the Tanana, and the Touchstone First Nations people. Archaeological data show that the site was occupied by First Nations people for at least 11,000 years. And finally, there is a family reason why we felt compelled to introduce our grandsons, Brayden and Adrien, to the land of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and Fort Constantine. But you'll have to wait to the end of the video to find out what that family reason is. Note, the area lies within the traditional territory of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nations people. The Fortymile town site is co-owned and co-managed by the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and the Yukon government. On a very sad note, a disaster took place in the spring of 2023. During a devastating spring breakup, ice covering the Yukon River rode up over the shore and destroyed the Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile town site. Many years of restoration by the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and the Yukon government were lost. Due to the resulting hazards, the Fortymile town site was closed in the summer of 2023. Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and Yukon government asked people not to travel to this site until further notice. In case you're wondering, we were allowed to access this area because we were guided and remained in the presence of Tommy Taylor, a member of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation. Tommy Taylor, with his wife, is also a Dawson City-based tour operator. We are grateful to Tommy and his wife Dawn for arranging the trip and allowing us to visit. That's a rather long intro, so let's get into the video. Enjoy. One of the benefits of traveling with Tommy Taylor to Fort Constantine was his knowledge of the river and the life of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in people on the river. He generously shared those insights with us along the trip, and I share some of his insights with you.
The color of the water is glacier silt. This comes from southern Yukon, a place called Moy National Park. There's a glacier field there. It fills up the mouth of the White River. It flows into a river called White River. The mouth of the White River is 100 miles upstream from Dawson. It fills up the Yukon River with silt from there all the way to the mouth, which is 1,600 miles. So we have 2 types of salmon around here. We have the king salmon and the chum salmon. One of the main spawning grounds for the king salmon is the Tr'ondëk River. So the king salmon gets here around early mid-July. They finish running around mid-late August. The chum salmon gets here early August. They finish running around mid-late November. That island over there is called Dog Island. During the gold rush, there were 30 to 40,000 people in Dawson City. One of the main transportation in the wintertime is by sled dogs.
Oh,
In the summertime, when they're too busy to take care of dogs, they hired natives to moose side keep the dogs here for the summer.
wow.
Then before freeze up, they'd come pick up their dogs, and over the winter, they're all over the country, taking 10 miles to go.
Huh. I never knew that.
I own Dog Island today.
You own it?
You own it.
Do you have
Cool.
any dogs on it?
Yeah. Used to have 52.
Wow.
I ran sled dogs for 25 years.
Wow.
Gave them up 2012. I grew up in that island.
Huh.
My parents had a fish camp there on the far side for about 40 years. Together, my parents, Martha and David Taylor, raised 16 children on this river.
Wow.
I have 2 sisters left.
Hmm.
14 girls and 2 boys.
My goodness.
My father, David Taylor, passed away in 1981 at the age of 95 years old. My
Hmm.
mother passed away in 1995. She was 108 years old.
Wow.
Wow.
The road that goes from Mooside Village down to just before the bluff down there. They used to get firewood in this whole area.
Mhm.
So they took the wood out in the wintertime, and then from Mooside they took the wood to Dawson by river.
I'm not sure I hear it now, and I'm never
It's a
sure,
hissing.
Tommy, whether it's my ears or whether it's the river. The river, is the river singing?
It always sings,
Okay.
put you to sleep.
No, right now it's not, but back there it was like
Back,
almost like a
back
hiss.
there, yeah, it was a hiss.
Place your silk
Oh.
Ah, against the boat.
rubbing up against the boat. You can hear that in the canoe, you can hear that aluminum boat. You even hear it in George Blackberry.
Wow, I never noticed
I never heard it on the ferry, but it was clear
If you
this
listen
morning.
close enough, you can hear it on the
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
any kind of boat. As long as you're in the silty water, you can hear it. So,
Mhm.
How unstable, like the upwelling can make it very unstable in the canoe, is that?
Yeah,
canoe,
well,
is,
that's a bit.
canoe is never stable, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
more unstable. Like.
Any means, it's never
Yeah,
stable.
yeah.
I hate canoes.
Yeah.
I'm scared of canoes.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
just you roll your eyes the wrong way and it falls
Yeah.
over. Yeah. No,
So
never in this.
in your cultural background, then, were they
Kayak. They use
kayaks? Ah,
Because
see,
it's narrow, long and narrow.
yeah.
It was easy to go upstream with it.
Ah,
They didn't use river boats, too heavy. They
okay.
used caribou skin boats, moose skin boats, and birch.
The trail.
So in the fall time, around early mid-October, when the glacier field starts to freeze, it's not producing silt, so the shoreline silt settles first, both sides of the river. So the eagles would perch themselves on a tree and sit there and watch the salmon come up. As soon as they see the salmon, they go and pick them up.
Hmm. Have you seen changes over your life?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Big change.
Yeah.
More snow, heavy, wet snow.
Mm-hmm.
You see some of the treetops are white.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's because of the snow. When it snows over the winter, the top of the spruce trees, mainly spruce trees, they can't hold the weight of the snow, so it does this.
Yeah.
It snaps off.
Snaps. Yeah, we did. We
We've
have
seen
seen
lots of
lots
those.
of those.
Lots.
of those.
Yeah. So every year it's getting more and more snow, and it's wet and more damp.
Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of wind
Mm.
over the winter.
Hmm.
Lots of wind. It blows. Like I keep track on my calendar on a daily basis, year round, for the weather.
Mm-hmm.
Change in temperature. It's getting more hot and hot longer.
Oh, hot. Yeah.
Our first river stop after leaving Dawson City was a visit to the only operating fish wheel left in the Yukon. The fish wheel was a common way to harvest salmon from the river.
So this here is a fish wheel. Invented in 1884 by Chinese. Came to North America early 1900s. As the salmon swim up along the shoreline, bumps into its wire mesh, slides them in the sleeping basket, and turns counterclockwise. It scoops up the salmon. They fall into that trough, slide down, trough fall into the holding box. The biggest salmon I ever seen come out of the Yukon River caught by Fishwheel 30 miles down the river weighed 94 pounds.
Oh.
My father and I caught a 72 pounder. The fish wheel is made of one type of wood, it's all spruce sapwood. My father built these all his life. He taught me how to build them myself. So you build a fish reel with 2 baskets like this one, you can build them with 3 or 4. But the more baskets you put on it, the more you got to maintain. So this is the only fish reel in the Yukon. Everybody else used gill nets when we're able to fish.
It'd be noisy if you had several of them all in a row.
Paul's moose in the faulthead.
Sorry?
Paul's moose in the faulthead.
Oh, that's the moose.
So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, well, that's very clever.
So what is it that the moose find appealing?
The sound.
Just the
Sounds like a
noise.
moose.
Just the noise. They get curious, they come out and they look around.
And I guess the eagles don't get into the holding pen, I guess, do they?
Oh, ravens.
Ravens will.
More ravens than anything else, because they're not scared of nothing.
Yeah.
Eagles don't bother. No. Well, no fish today.
Yeah.
After leaving the fish wheel, we headed northwest for a 2-hour trip to Fort Constantine along the Yukon River. Many people canoe the Yukon River, and we saw this couple on one of the many gravel bars that occur in the river. Before this trip, I had never been on the Yukon River. One of my immediate reactions was the beauty and rocky cliffs that occur along this part of the Yukon. I really had no idea what the landscape looked like, and it was stunning. As we approached Fortymile and Fort Constantine, the magnitude of the natural disaster that occurred during the 2023 spring breakup became obvious. The shoreline in this area had been densely covered with conifer and deciduous trees, but this summer the shore appeared to have been scraped by a bulldozer. There were virtually no trees left. Almost the entire restored town site of Fortymile had been removed from the face of the earth. Only a couple of buildings remained. We were astounded. We passed by the carnage at the Fortymile town site, sailed past the Fortymile River, and headed to the former location of Fort Constantine. In this area, the Yukon River is chocolate brown in color because it contains a lot of silt. You can't see rocks that lie just below the surface. Tommy Taylor skillfully selected a place to land the boat where we could get out and look where the fort once stood. We had no expectations about seeing any remnants of Fort Constantine because Mother Nature had long since reclaimed her land. But what we saw was still a sobering demonstration of the power of water and ice during the spring 2023 breakup. So we're at the junction of Fortymile River and Yukon River. We're actually sitting on the west bank of Fortymile. And this was damaged this spring by the breakup, the ice breakup. There were great piles of ice that completely demolished Fortymile and scraped the land surface where Fort Constantine used to be. Right across, you can see a couple of structures. Just in this area here, structures of Fortymile, the town site left. It's been virtually destroyed. So we're going to have a little look. You can see how powerful the ice was. The trees here are fairly substantive. Just like a bulldozer came through. And that was the result of the spring breakup and the ice flow. You get a sense of power of the ice in the 2023 breakup. This is a fairly large spruce, I guess. And it's just uprooted, torn out of the ground. The land in the area where the ice overflowed during the spring breakup, just completely sheared off. Everything that was standing is gone. Quite remarkable. Recall that Fort Constantine, built in 1895, is an historic site. This was the location where in 1894, Inspector Charles Constantine of the Northwest Mounted Police recommended to the Canadian government the establishment of a Northwest Mounted Police detachment in the area to keep peace and enforce Canada's sovereignty over the area. These sketches give you some insight to what the fort looked like. In addition to peacekeeping and exercising Canada's jurisdiction, Fort Constantine became the area's center for Canadian judicial, land, and customs administration. Yep, let's do that.
Yep.
After looking around the Fort Constantine site, we headed across the Fortymile River to see if it was safe to access the Fortymile town site. Before we look at Fortymile, I promised to touch on the family connection with Fort Constantine. Recall that Inspector Charles Constantine of the Northwest Mounted Police was dispatched by the Canadian government to the Fortymile area to assess the need to bring peace, order, and good governance to the area given the influx of settler people related to the discovery of placer gold along the Fortymile River in 1886. His 1894 recommendation to the Canadian government was acted upon, and in 1895, Fort Constantine was built to house a Northwest Mounted Police detachment. Now, both Charles Constantine and his wife Henrietta lived at Fort Constantine in 1895, 1896, and part of 1897. Inspector Charles Constantine and Henrietta had a son named Charles Francis Constantine. CF had a daughter named Anne Ginn, née Constantine. Anne was therefore a granddaughter of Inspector Charles Constantine. Anne Ginn, née Constantine, was the mother of my wife, Elizabeth Fionn, née Ginn. That makes my wife, Elizabeth, a great-granddaughter of Inspector Charles Constantine. That makes our sons, Peter Fionn and Eric Fionn, the great-great-grandsons of Inspector Constantine. And that makes our grandsons, Brayden Fionn and Adrien Fionn, the great-great-great-grandsons of Inspector Charles Constantine. And that's a bit of a mouthful. So, that was one reason why we wanted to visit Fort Constantine's site with our grandsons, Brayden and Adrien, to let them experience firsthand a part of their ancestry. Now, on a more delicate topic, the pronunciation of the name Constantine. It is pronounced Constantine, not Constantine. We encountered many people in the Yukon who mispronounce his name. So, now you have the correct pronunciation of Constantine from a direct descendant authority, that is, my wife, the great-granddaughter of Charles Constantine. So we've just landed at Fortymile, the town site. Looking back over at Fort Constantine, the whole area was basically sheared by a glacier. No, sorry. The whole area was basically sheared by the ice during the spring breakup. And with Tommy and his permission, we're going to have a look at Fortymile, the town site. Tommy determined that it was not safe to access the Fortymile town site. This aerial view helps you understand the scope of the devastation caused by the ice during the spring 2023 breakup. Virtually the entire Fortymile town site was removed by the overflow ice. It really is quite amazing to see how effectively Mother Nature can reclaim her land. Before we leave Fortymile area, I want to share with you that notwithstanding the damage created during the spring 2023 breakup, the area around Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile has not been abandoned. Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile lies within the traditional territory of Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in. It is co-owned and co-managed by the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and the government of Yukon. It has immense cultural and historic significance to the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and other First Nations peoples. In 1887, Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile became the first non-native settlement in Yukon, and in September 2023, the Tr'ondëk Klondike region was established as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile is one of 8 component sites that make up the Tr'ondëk Klondike. A Yukon Heritage Statement reads that the impacts of the 2023 spring breakup do not change the cultural significance or the ancestral legacy of these lands for the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and the Yukon. Therefore, an assessment is underway by the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in and the Yukon government to guide development of a conservation plan to provide options to guide the future of the site. A finalized conservation plan is anticipated by 2025. So, before we left the area, Libby and grandsons Brayden and Adrien had one last look across the Fortymile River towards the Fort Constantine site. So, before we leave Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile and head back to Dawson City, I leave you with some photographs to illustrate what the historic Ch'ëdähdëk Fortymile town site looked like prior to the devastating ice jam and ice overflow that took place in spring 2023. A lot of restoration had taken place to preserve this part of Indigenous, Yukon, and Canadian history. By the way, these are photos I composed during our previous visits to the area in 2007, 2008, and 2019. On our way back, Tommy Taylor passed close to Moosehide, the traditional village of the Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation. Moosehide was first occupied about 9,000 years ago. It is located near a traditional salmon fishing ground. It is part of the Tr'ondëk Klondike UNESCO World Heritage Site, established in the fall of 2023. There's a lot of history associated with Moosehide Village, and I have included a reference in the description of this video. We landed at Dawson City after having thoroughly enjoyed the informative insights shared by Tommy Taylor of Fishwheel Charters. Our grandsons, Libby and I, had a rare privilege to visit the former site of Fort Constantine, and we got to see firsthand the devastation created in the spring of 2023 during the ice breakup along the Yukon River. It was one of our highlights of the 2023 travels with our grandsons. Thank you if you stayed to the end of this longer video. I hope you enjoyed and perhaps even learned something about this part of the Yukon.